This morning it was
Now he's 16.
okay.
Hello.
Good morning, everybody, on this chilly Tuesday. Since I'm going to be teaching on today, tomorrow, and Thursday, we decided to do a three-part series, and we're going to focus on certain aspects of kashrus, and we're calling it chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. These are not ice cream flavors, but these are things related to special issues concerning these three items in terms of kashrus. So the topic that I want to talk about today is bishul akum. Bishul akum simply means that Chazal determined that we should not eat foods that were cooked by non-Jews because it might lead to socialization and intermarriage. And therefore, there are strict restrictions on what you can eat that was cooked by a non-Jew. So there are two criteria. The prohibition of bishul akum only applies to foods that meet the following two criteria. And there's a lot of discussion about this, but the first category is eino nechal k'mosha hayu chai. In other words, foods that are not eaten raw. Foods that are consumed without cooking are not subject to this prohibition. So if something has to be cooked, then it is. But if food is raw, can be eaten raw, then it's not subject to the problem of bishul akum. And the other criteria is ole al shulchan malachim, suitable to be served at a royal table. In other words, if something is not appropriate to serve to an honored guest, chances are it wouldn't lead to socialization. So snack foods, for example, may not fall into this category. So in a broader context, today we have hashgacha on almost everything because it's the complicated process of cooking and preparing it. But in previous years, where you didn't have all the additional ingredients that you have now, if something had basically did not have anything unkosher in it, and it wasn't, a food that will be served to royalty or to an honored guest, if it didn't have any unkosher ingredients, it was considered edible. People would eat it, and they weren't that careful. Like if a product would say vegetable shortening or pure vegetable shortening, people would eat those cookies without a hashgacha. Then later on, when we became more aware of the fact that there are many, many stabilizers and other ingredients that are added in, it required hashgacha. But even with hashgacha, if certain foods, let's assume you had meat that was perhaps slaughtered kosher, obviously, but was prepared totally by non-Jews, and that is ochel, that is ole l'shulchan malachim, and it's not a snack food, and they don't eat it raw. Does bishul akum apply to that? And it certainly would. That's why you have to have it produced by Jews all the way through. I want to focus on one particular food today to show how the process works itself out in terms of bishul akum and also in terms of the process of preparing what we think is a very simple food. And that is the chocolate. Everybody likes chocolate, unless my wife is allergic to it, unfortunately. But the production process is important to understand why chocolate may or may not be subject to the restrictions of Bishul Yisrael. Does it have to be produced totally by Jews, or can it be produced under supervision by non-Jews? So let's take a look at the chocolate from the beginning. It comes from the seeds of a cacao fruit, known as cocoa beans, colloquially, and each bean is surrounded by a sweet-tasting pulp, which is edible, raw, and has a sweet, tasty flavor, but this is not usually what people eat. The bean itself, which is the main component used for chocolate production, is very bitter and does not resemble chocolate at all. and it's not eaten in its natural state. The beans are harvested, they're gathered in piles and left to, to sit for a while to ferment in their own pulp once they're harvested. And the fermentation process gives the beans a chocolate-like flavor. It gets very hot. And the fermentation, however, is not considered bishul, not considered cooking in terms of bishul akum, because it doesn't involve fire or any similar heat source. So fermentation or malicha, salting in any case, is not considered bishul akum, and it's not included in the rabbinical decrees against it. Following fermentation, the beans are dried and roasted, and it's the roasting that gives the beans a chocolatey flavor. Then the beans are shelled and broken down into smaller pieces called nibs, which are ground into a paste called cocoa liquor or cocoa mass, which is used in chocolate production. And it's separated into cocoa butter and cocoa cake. The cocoa cake is what it forms the basis for hot chocolate, the chocolate powder, or solid chocolate bars. Cocoa butter is used in chocolate, gives it the buttery consistency, and it allows it to be melted, but not to melt on normal room temperature. So the chocolate is mixed with cocoa butter, sugar, squeezed through some very fast spinning rollers, and this is the refining step. For milk chocolate, they would and white chocolate, you'd add dried milk to this recipe. Again, different flavors can be added. Then it's put into a tank, which agitates it, further breaks down the components. It's called conching, and sometimes other ingredients can be added to it. Now, all of this, again, is this considered bishul? And if it is bishul, is it subjected to the bishul akum prohibition? I want to go through. There are more process. It's not important to get all the details of the processing, but basically, the chocolate is heated at various stages in its production. The Shulchan Aruch rules that when multiple ingredients, raw or inedible raw, edible raw, are mixed and cooked by a non-Jew, we follow the main ingredient, determining its status. If the main ingredient is edible raw, then there's no problem with bishul akum. It's it's eaten raw, which is one of the criteria. So chocolate is not subject to bishul akum because the cocoa bean has been added to other ingredients to the point where it is no longer the major ingredient. But unlike the Shulchan Aruch, the beans are roasted. So what's the halacha? The first person who deals with this is, again, in the modern production of chocolate, was the Pri Chadosh in the 17th century, I think. And he says that basically the bean component is nullified when it's made when it's made into milk chocolate. And again, the process has gotten a little bit more sophisticated since the 17th century. And he was talking about more like the liquid, the hot chocolate. It might also apply to other forms of chocolate as well, where the cocoa is not the main ingredient. For example, white chocolate. It's usually sugar is the main ingredient of white chocolate. But basically, there's another opinion, and that's the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer takes a whole different approach, and he draws a halachic distinction between coffee and chocolate. See, coffee is permitted because the bean component is nullified in the finished product, whereas chocolate can be eaten as is, and therefore he holds that the cocoa basis for hot chocolate and solid chocolate is edible raw and therefore not subject to bishul akum, which means you can eat it, regardless of who prepares it, as long as there are no non-kosher ingredients in there. So, again, there are no companies producing raw chocolate in the United States, as far as I know. But the cocoa beans are fermented and dried, not necessarily roasted. And then you get into a whole discussion about roasting after fermentation. Again, you really have to get into the process of manufacture. The other category, so from the perspective of the cooking part, bishul akum would seem to be permissible because it is not something that is eaten raw usually. It has to go through a process. The second criteria is whether chocolate is ola al shulchan malachim. Is chocolate something that's considered a significant and important food? Okay, to some people, yeah, you're nodding your head. Yes, it's important because people love chocolate. Chocolate can be eaten by itself. It can be a snack, be dessert. There are very fancy, elaborately decorated chocolates, gift boxes of chocolates. And basically, poskim have pretty much agreed that chocolate falls into the same category as any other candy, which are not sufficiently significant as an important food to require bishul yisrael. So bottom line is that even though there's a cooking process, it is not considered that significant of a food to require shulchan yisrael. And therefore, as long as it has a hechsher, that nothing non-kosher is added into the process, because we know there are so many extra things. There are flavorings and stabilizers and all kinds of things that we don't know where it comes from. As long as it has hashgacha, cocoa powder, baking chocolate, drinking chocolate, chocolate coins, even fancy chocolate, does not require bishul yisrael. As long as the chocolate has a hechsher, it can be eaten. Now, this whole discussion, I'm not interested in the process itself, but it's important for us to understand that when you buy a product in the store, there's a background to it. There is a mashgiach at a plant, whether it's Hershey's or whether it's any other company that makes chocolate, Lieber's, wherever it might be, who certifies that there's nothing in that chocolate that is non-kosher. And that's all you really have to know, because it doesn't fit into the category of requiring strictly only Jewish production. There are certain things. Now, again, there's, for example, let's take sushi, for example. Sushi is for most people, it's a snack food. It's not the major component of a meal. Now, you could get a sushi bowl, and that could be your meal. That might be a different category. But sushi by itself, because it's a snack food, and as long as it's kosher, doesn't require bishul yisrael, according to many, many poskim. There are some who might differ. And Rav Shechter is very strict about that, because there's a mashgiach that in every kosher Chinese place that says that the ingredients are all kosher. And that, according to most poskim, is all that you need. Some would say, well, fish is a major food category, and therefore it might require bishul yisrael. And there are some poskim who are not a big fan of Chinese food, where the cooks are not Jewish, where just the mashgiach certify the ingredients. But bishul yisrael is only required if a food is chashuv, if it's significant, and if it's something that you don't normally eat raw. But then again, sushi is eaten raw, so that kind of goes in favor of it not requiring bishul yisrael, only hashgacha on the ingredients. So my purpose in today's discussion is for you just to have an appreciation for the halakhic constructs and the halakhic concepts behind a simple thing like a bar of chocolate. The process to make that bar of chocolate what it is a fairly complicated one. It might fall into the category of cooking, or really more but at the initial stages of fermentation of the bean, but later on there is some cooking involved or heating up of it, so to speak. But since it is not considered a major important food category, therefore it doesn't require Bishul Yisrael, and therefore as long as you have chocolate or other snack foods that are in and of themselves not something you would serve to a guest, an important, again, it's hard to say because today that category might change. If an important guest comes to your home, so before you offer him something, what do you offer that guest? Do you offer him a piece of chocolate, or do you offer him a cup of coffee? And how are these considered in terms of Ola al Shulchan Malachim? That is a subject for a whole discussion by itself. Is Ola Shulchan Malachim something that is subjective or objective? And that's a very, very interesting question as to what is considered Ola al Shulchan Malachim, because eating habits might change. For some people, pizza is a meal. Is pizza something you would serve to an honored guest or to a? Probably not. But it's in that in between. So there are a lot. There's black and white, and there's a lot of gray. So chocolate is just one example of a type of food that comes with a great deal of baggage in terms of what allows you to give it a hashgacha, enabling you to eat it in the first place. Other than the fact that the ingredients are kosher, there are other considerations that we have to keep in mind in terms of whether it requires Bishul Yisrael or Bishul Akum is sufficient. Huh. And that is what I wanted to share with you today. It's a very brief outline of a very complicated subject that the poskim still argue about today, given the fact that eating habits change from generation to generation. What one generation might consider a snack, somebody else considers a meal, and vice versa. So that opens up a whole new category of how people's behavior may or may not affect the basic halachic structure of a certain category. And that's a subject all by itself. Any questions? Stunned by the silence. Okay.
Wally.
Yeah.
What about items that have a health benefit to them? Would they be subject to them?
Well, are you talking about medicine, or are you talking about certain foods that you have to eat for health reasons?
He's talking about chocolate for health.
Dark chocolate.
Yeah, only dark chocolate.
Again, chocolate, whether it's eaten for whatever reason you might consume it, does not require Bishul Yisrael as long as it has hashgacha. Again, because it's not considered a main food. It's a snack.
To some of us, it might be a main food.
Okay. Then I give you, there are other issues involved. If that becomes your main food, there are other issues involved that are much more serious than what's proper you. But again, for some people, and pizza is the prime example. For some people, pizza is a snack. When pizza was first, kosher pizza anyway, was first introduced, it was a novelty, but nobody made that into their meal. It was a snack. And that's where you got into the whole machlokas of, do you have to wash over pizza or not? I remember very, very clearly when the first kosher pizza store opened up on the Lower East Side, and this was in the late 50s, early 60s, and everybody would go down there on a Saturday night. But because there was this discussion as to whether you make mazonos or hamotzi on the pizza, so they used to have, next to the washing station, they would have pieces of pita bread. So everybody would wash and make hamotzi on the pita bread and then enjoy their pizza to absolve them of any doubt at all as to what bracha you make. But what was one person's snack is somebody else's meal. And the halacha recognized that, by the way. If you consume an entire box of cookies over which you made a mazonos initially, you'd have to bench. If it was your intention to eat a box of cookies for your meal, you'd probably have to wash as well.
Only if they were chocolate cookie.
Okay. B'tam v'reach ein lehitvakeach, as they say. Everybody has their own favorite snack food or dessert food, and some people, in fact, make a meal out of it. I mean, a lot of kids in college don't eat normal meals, and they get by eating snack food all day long because they're, whether it's time pressure or just convenience. It affects brachos as well. If your snacks become your main meal, then you have to look at which brachos you make and whether you have to bench it. It's not a simple issue. It's not a simple issue. But I just wanted to open up your understanding that hashgacha is not a simple issue. There are many, many underlying issues over a simple thing as a piece of chocolate. Anyhow, so the Bishul Yisrael issue is put aside for chocolate, but we'll talk about other issues tomorrow and Wednesday, and Thursday rather, on some of the other issues raised by other foods that we should be aware of in terms of manufacture, in terms of hashgacha, and what the categories that they fit into in terms of kashrus. But as I say, Yoredeya is a very complicated area of Shulchan Aruch that is not studied often enough or well enough. I mean, the people who are in the hashgacha business, that is their bread and butter, literally, and they have to know it well. But there are so many issues and so many different permutations of the halacha on every possible food item that you can think of, which to the average consumer is unaware of it. He has hashgacha, I'll eat it and make a bracha on it. But what behind issuing that hashgacha or in allowing the company to get the hashgacha? Many companies apply to the OU to get the hashgacha. But when they're told what they have to do in order to get the hashgacha, sometimes they back off. Because if you're getting a serious hashgacha, then you have to follow the rules. Sometimes you have these rules with requiring a permanent hashgacha in place all the time. Others are required to have only what they call a yotzi v'nichnas, somebody to pop in to check on the ingredients. Do you have to have Shomer Shabbos workers in the production line? There are a lot of interesting questions that apply to different foods under different circumstances, and we will, Yirmiyat Hashem, touch on some of these during the rest of the week. But this is a little bit about chocolate. Tomorrow is about vanilla. And the Thursday will be about strawberries. Each of them has their own unique issues that we will try to present. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, Wally.
Okay. Go out and have some chocolate. Enjoy.
Absolutely.
Hot chocolate on a cold day is wonderful.
Is it cold in New Jersey?
It is a little chilly out there today.
Okay, same here.